Sounds pretty good. This is a CT-F950 Pioneer stereo cassette tape deck. This particular deck was made sometime in 1980. I could tell from when I rebuilt the motor, and we're going to talk about that. This deck came to us with pretty few problems. It was in pretty good shape. It needed some good cleaning inside. It needed some adjustment of the internal potentiometers, but for the most part it was in really good condition. Of course, the things that have to be done to it are polishing all of the buttons, cleaning the display. These displays get a sort of smoke haze behind them. This particular display was cracked and scratched, so I replaced the lens on that display. And the other thing that we found with this one, this particular unit had a really nasty faceplate, and I'm going to show you that here. I'll just kind of slip it in front of the camera and hope it focuses. So here was the original faceplate, and you can see it was pretty badly damaged on one edge. It was in pretty just nasty condition. All of the everything was kind of scratched up and really just didn't look good. I can't do a whole lot to fix brushed aluminum. What I can do is I can round off the corner with a grinder, and then I can round off all the other corners to make it even. But when I started to do that and looked at this, I said, I just need to get a better plate. So I found a replacement faceplate online from somebody who was parting out their unit. And the only problem with this is there are some minor scratches right here on the dial. I couldn't take the dial off of the old one because it wouldn't adhere properly to this when I put it in. But this is a pretty good face. This looks good. Remember, folks are pulling these things out of e-waste and off the side of the road, and who knows what's going on with them. So what I'm going to do is take you on a tour of the inside so you can see a little bit about what was done. But before I do that, I'm going to go through some of the features just so that you understand what you're buying. Now, remember, you're buying something that's 40 years old. So while I'm going to guarantee that when you get it, it's not DOA, I'm not going to guarantee that it works for 6 months or a year. My expectation is it'll work for a long time, but I'm going to take you on a tour of some of the things that we've done to this. But first, I'm going to show you a little bit about the features. The first thing that you need to know is you have a timer start, so you can set it to play, record, or not to do anything when you turn it on. I'm going to set it to record because I actually have media playing, and I'm going to turn this on. You'll see it'll start recording immediately. Now, what are some of the features here? I'm going to show you a couple of features that you will probably want to take advantage of. You want to be careful leaving the timer start on record, especially if you have a tape in there that you don't want to record on and it has not had the tabs broken out. I'm going to turn that off. You have peak, hold, and average for your meter. So when it's on peak, and I'm going to turn this down a little bit because the input is pretty high coming from the YouTube library. When you have it on peak, you'll see it gives you a peak, but when you have it on average, they flow a little more. When you have it on peak hold, it'll hold the highest. Now this particular input media, the input media is a little bit right leaning, but you can see I've got it on peak hold. You can see the peak is holding. Now I did something interesting. While I'm recording, I'm listening to it. So I have this set for tape monitor, which means that what we're hearing right now is actually what's on the tape. which is good because when you want to adjust your bias and listen to it, you can do that and then determine if it's right for the tape type you're using. So when I do this, I'm going to make some adjustments to the bias. I'm going to turn it left, it'll get bright. I'm going to turn it to the right, it'll get a little duller. All right, so you ready? Hear that? A little duller, a little brighter. Okay? Now obviously I've got Dolby on right now. I can take Dolby off and we can hear the difference. Okay? Now what's the difference between tape and source? Well, tape is what we're actually recording. That's what we're putting onto the tape itself. The source is what's coming in. Now you'll notice that the deck plays back when it's recording a little brighter. I adjusted up the equalization on the output just a tad so that we would have a little brighter sounding music. That tends to go in line with the adjustments in the manual. So it actually sounds quite nice, quite bright, and has a great range to it. We'll play some things in a minute that illustrate that. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how the memory works. Right now we're recording, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say at the counter 0, I want to go ahead and repeat, which means that when we stop it and we rewind it, when it hits 0, it's going to start playing again. Counter, repeat. Same thing with end. The only difference is with end, it's going to go all the way to the end of the tape. It's going to rewind, and then it's going to play the tape from the beginning. Now, what this is nice for is you can put a tape in and set the repeat to end, and it will keep playing that side of the tape over and over again. It'll play it, it'll rewind it, it'll play it. Remember, this is not an auto-reverse cassette deck, so this is only playing one side of the tape. But it will rewind and start playing again. And it'll keep doing that all day long. There's no counter or anything like that to stop it from continuing to repeat. Now, this is something we recorded a little earlier, and you can hear very clear. And you'll notice that the meter changes based on the output volume. And this is a left and right, so you can adjust it if you need, if you have balance concerns. Very bright with Dolby on. So we turn Dolby off. No equalization for the tape type, and gets very tinny. So it's got a very good sound to it, very, very nice, very warm. Okay, so what did we do to this? Well, we did a few things. We rebuilt the rewind motor. Now what's important about that is that this, by the way, had the date code of 1980 on it. These get a lot of wear and the armature gets dirty. Not really much else goes wrong inside of them. There are a couple of contacts that are a governor control. They need to be cleaned and decarbonized. And then I put it all back together and make sure that it's well greased so that there aren't any problems. This switch occasionally needs to be replaced on these units. I have a whole bunch of them, but this one was in good shape, didn't have any trouble. This switch governs when you put the tape in, starting the unit up to rewind and get the tape in the right place. On many of these units, one of the things that I always do check is this capacitor back here to make sure that it's working properly. If this capacitor has gone bad, if it's gone out of spec, what will happen is when you rewind, when it gets to the end, it won't auto shut off. So that's in good shape. I did not have to replace that on this one. I did, of course, replace all of the belts and the idler wheel gear, the idler wheel tire, because they always need to be replaced. And if you're new to these decks, there is a static discharge spring that does need to be put on or replaced if it's gone. This stops any static buildup in the mechanism from feeding back through the head. Other things, in this section here, this is where the volume for the output and EQ for the output is handled. Back here is where the record volume is handled, and over here is where the Dolby circuitry is. Here's where the bias circuitry is. I rarely change the bias circuitry unless I have a real problem with a deck. I had one the other day that I had to do some real work on, and I do that with a scope to make sure that that the output is proper. Adjusting the Dolby is really hard to do, so I tend not to do it. I always mark them where they are and make sure that the pots are clean by working them back and forth, but I always return them to the same state that they were in. So other things that go on with these units down in this front part are a couple of potentiometers that control the FL display. So this was a little out of spec, just had to get those straightened up. The same thing with the volume and the EQ. For the most part, the deck's in pretty good shape. There were only a couple of other things that I did, and I'll draw your attention to that in a minute. Now, one of the things that people have a lot of trouble with on these units is the head assembly and the pinch rollers. Now, what's important to remember is pinch rollers on a lot of the older equipment either get hard or brittle, and they tend to crack and they tend to give problems. You can use something like Rubber Restore and clean them sufficiently, which is what I've done. These are in really good shape. So the pinch rollers do not need, they've been cleaned, and you'll see a little bit of buildup from tape on the pinch roller. That's okay. You don't have to go crazy and clean them all the time. And if you do clean them, be very aware that the first tape you put in could get folded and crinkled on this side. One of the things with these Pioneer decks, and it's been this way for years, I used to sell these in the early 80s, is when you would clean the pinch roller and the glide path, you needed to let it sit and dry for a long time. And especially if you decide you're going to use Rubber Restore on these, that needs to sit overnight before you put anything, before you put a tape in. Otherwise, what will happen is this roller will pull the tape, begin to fold it, and it tantamount to eating the tape, but it will begin to, it will ruin the tape. And so be very careful. If you decide, you want to go ahead and clean the pinch rollers, that's fine. clean them, but let them dry out. If you're not having problems with the pinch rollers, don't mess with them. Because as I said, if you mess with them, what's going to end up happening is it's going to start eating your tapes. If you're having problems, occasionally clean them. Be very careful when you clean them. But that's my advice for you with respect to the pinch rollers. When you clean them, the method for doing that is to press that button in, and then to press play, and then to use a cotton swab on this side where you can actually get in and lightly clean off the buildup on that pinch roller. This one's harder. You have to sort of wedge in here, and this one does not have as much pressure. That pinch roller only barely touches the capstan because its lot in life is to help feed, and it runs just a little slower than this one does because you want to keep it taut across the tape head. Now, when you're cleaning the tape head, this is the record side, this is the playback side, nothing in the middle. So you clean this side and you clean that side, and again, make sure that you've done a good job of letting it dry before you put a good tape in there. Now, one thing that you'll notice, and I always paint them red, I always use red fingernail polish to hold them in place. I have adjusted the azimuth to factory specifications. Now, if you buy this deck and you put your favorite mixed tape in and it sounds like it's playing underwater, then the azimuth for the machine that you use to record it may have been different from this one. That happens. Okay? So if that happens, this is your tape deck after you bought it. I don't care what you do with it. It's up to you. But these actually come off. These are little thumb screws that come off. And this plate comes off. When that plate comes off, there is a hole right here that lets you adjust the azimuth when it's playing. So you have the way to do that without having to take off the faceplate itself. Taking the faceplate off is a little bit of an involved process. You have to take the top off and all that stuff, and it's a lot easier just to thumb screw these off, pull that little plate off, and make your change. Okay. This is a bit of handheld video so that you can see the unit. You can see a little bit of a blemish there that I talked about. It's really about it. Good looking unit. Has a really good case. I was able to get, out of the multiple units that I got to sort of put this one together, I got a beautiful case top for it. This case top is almost like it came out of the box, brand new. A little bit of a scuff there, but overall, nothing really on the top. Looks pretty good. I'm going to get you some detailed pictures in the listing so that you can see it. Overall, really in good shape. So this is a nice deck. This deck is in great shape, plays well, records excellently. Really a nice deck. I hope that whoever buys it really loves and enjoys it. That's it for now.